The opulent office of Mr. David Chen, regional director of Globus Air, shimmered with the cold, sterile light of a winter afternoon. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic, yet now ironically claustrophobic, view of the bustling city below. Chen, a man whose tailored suits usually exuded an aura of unshakable power, sat slumped at his immense mahogany desk, the very picture of a broken man. His normally impeccably coiffed hair was disheveled, and his eyes, usually sharp and dismissive, now darted around the room, wild with a desperate, hunted fear. A flat-screen television, mounted discreetly in the corner, flickered with breaking news. The chiron beneath the solemn anchor read, Globus Air under federal investigation, massive corruption scandal unfolding. A graphic of the Globus Air logo, once a symbol of global connectivity, now appeared tainted, shadowed by accusations of systemic discrimination, fraudulent practices, and safety breaches. The office intercom buzzed, startling Chen. His assistant's voice, usually deferential, was now clipped, devoid of warmth. Mr. Chen, a representative from the Department of Justice is here. They have a warrant for your arrest. A guttural sound escaped Chen's throat, a mix of disbelief and utter despair. He lunged for his desk phone, his fingers fumbling as he dialed a number from memory. The call rang once, twice, then clicked to voicemail. It's David. Pick up. You owe me. You promised me protection, he screamed into the receiver, his voice cracking, but the only reply was the dispassionate tone of the automated message. He slammed the phone down, his gaze drifting back to the television, where the anchor continued to detail the downfall of his empire, his legacy, his life. A single, solitary tear traced a path through the sweat on his cheek, reflecting the flickering images of his own ruin. 6 months earlier. Dr. Anya Sharma exuded an effortless command, even through the pixelated screen of a video conference. Her custom-tailored power suit, a shade of deep sapphire, seemed to ripple with quiet authority, mirroring the sharp intellect in her eyes. Gentlemen, ladies, she addressed the dozen faces on her screen, our projections for the Q3 merger are solid, contingent on the final regulatory approval from the Continental Aviation Board. I've personally overseen the critical path analysis, the data is irrefutable. Her voice, calm and precise, carried a weight that silenced any potential dissent. As CEO of Axis Solutions, a global consulting powerhouse specializing in aviation regulatory compliance and strategic partnerships, Anya navigated the highest echelons of corporate and governmental power with an almost surgical efficiency. She concluded the call with a brief, decisive nod, leaving no room for questions, only action. The clock on her minimalist desk read 6:45 a.m. Her flight to the International Summit in Geneva, where she was slated to deliver a keynote address on aviation safety protocols, was in just over 2 hours. She grabbed her perfectly organized attaché case, a picture of grace under pressure, and headed for the airport. Meanwhile, across town, in the sterile, overly air-conditioned corridors of Globus Air Regional Headquarters, Mr. David Chen was in his element, which was to say, he was making someone else's life miserable. His voice, a booming baritone that he clearly believed commanded respect, echoed down the hallway. Jenkins. My coffee. And this report is a shambles. Do you even understand the concept of a fiscal quarter, or are you just here to collect a paycheck? His subordinate, a young, earnest man, visibly flinched, clutching a steaming mug. Chen, in his own expensive, albeit slightly ill-fitting, suit, puffed out his chest, enjoying the palpable fear he inspired. He relished the small indignities he inflicted, believing they cemented his absolute power within his domain. And tell the gate agents to be extra vigilant today. I don't want any surprises in first class. We have important passengers, people who understand value. His smug grin indicated he believed he was a master of his universe, oblivious to the fact that his universe was about to collide with a force far greater than his limited imagination could conceive. The bustling check-in area of the international terminal hummed with the usual pre-flight chaos, hurried footsteps, murmurs in a dozen languages, the rhythmic clatter of luggage. Dr. Anya Sharma, ever composed, presented her passport and e-ticket at the Globus Air first-class counter. Good morning, she greeted the agent with a polite, professional smile. Sharma, Anya. Flight GA207 to Geneva. The agent, a young woman named Chloe, typed dutifully, her brow furrowing. I'm sorry, Dr. Sharma, she stammered, looking up with an apologetic but helpless expression. It seems there's been an issue with your seat. Our system is showing a technical anomaly with first class row 3A. Anya's smile remained, but a flicker of something colder crossed her eyes. An anomaly? My reservation was confirmed weeks ago. I have a critical keynote address in Geneva in a few hours. This is unacceptable. I understand completely, Dr. Sharma. Let me just check. Chloe's fingers flew across the keyboard, her unease growing. It appears the flight is overbooked in first class. We can offer you a seat in Economy Plus, or rebook you on a flight tomorrow morning. Anya's voice dropped a fraction, the calmness more chilling than any raised tone. Economy Plus is not an option. My ticket is for first class. And tomorrow morning is too late. There are clearly multiple empty seats in first class, according to your own seating chart. She gestured subtly towards a monitor showing the flight's layout. Just then, a portly, red-faced man in a too-tight suit swaggered up to the counter, cutting in front of a visibly uncomfortable queue. It was Mr. David Chen. He dismissed Anya with a casual glance, then addressed Chloe with an air of absolute entitlement. What's the hold-up here, agent? We have VIPs waiting. I certainly hope we're not delaying them for trivialities. His gaze lingered on Anya for a moment, a dismissive sneer playing on his lips, before he turned back to Chloe, as if Anya were beneath his notice. Is this about the overbooked situation in first class? I made it clear, no exceptions. We have a very important delegation from the Ministry of Finance on board today, and their comfort takes precedence. He emphasized there with a pointed look at Anya. Chloe, caught between two immovable forces, looked terrified. Sir, Dr. Sharma has a confirmed first-class ticket. Chen cut her off with a dismissive wave. Confirmed. Details. Sometimes, adjustments must be made for the greater good of the airline, wouldn't you agree, Doctor? He turned to Anya, his smile saccharine, but his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, we've had to reallocate seats. I can personally offer you an upgrade to our highly desirable Economy Plus, or, if you prefer, a full refund and the earliest flight out tomorrow. Our priority is ensuring a smooth journey for all our passengers, especially those who truly appreciate the premium experience. The subtle emphasis on truly appreciate and the insinuation of her not belonging were clear, cutting microaggressions. He was not directly insulting her, but his tone dripped with condescension and veiled prejudice, his body language radiating superiority. Anya met his gaze, her expression unreadable. No anger, no tears, just an almost glacial stillness. She sensed the game, the deliberate public humiliation. I see, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying immense weight. So, policy dictates that a confirmed first-class passenger is arbitrarily downgraded for unforeseen circumstances, while other seats remain empty. She glanced pointedly at the monitor again. Chen chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. My dear doctor, there are many things in this world that are not visible to the naked eye. Trust me, I know what's best for Globus Air and its valued clientele. He paused, a cruel glint in his eyes. Unless, of course, you prefer to simply not fly today. That would certainly simplify matters for everyone involved. He was convinced he had cornered her, that she would either comply or retreat in silent frustration. He couldn't have been more wrong. The air around Anya Sharma seemed to crackle with an unspoken tension, even as her outward demeanor remained perfectly serene. David Chen, basking in his perceived victory, turned to Chloe, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. See. Some people understand. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do. Make sure our VIPs are boarded without a hitch. He gave Anya one last dismissive glance, a flicker of triumph in his eyes, before swaggering away, leaving her standing alone, a stark figure of composure amidst the bustling terminal. Anya did not move immediately. She simply stood for a moment, letting the full weight of Chen's casual cruelty and blatant disregard for her rights sink in. There was no anger visibly etched on her face, no dramatic outburst. Instead, a profound sense of resolve settled upon her, firm and unyielding as granite. The slight tightening of her jaw was the only tell. She wasn't just a passenger, she was a woman whose professional integrity, whose very person, had just been publicly undermined and disrespected. This wasn't merely about a first-class seat, it was about systemic arrogance and the abuse of unchecked power. Slowly, deliberately, Anya retrieved her smartphone from her attaché case. Her movements were economical, precise. She didn't fumble, didn't hesitate. Her thumb scrolled briefly, then tapped. She brought the phone to her ear, her gaze distant, fixed on the departing figure of David Chen. "Jonathan," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, yet infused with an unmistakable authority. "It's Anya. Initiate the Access Protocol 7. Immediately. I need a full, immediate audit of Globus Air's regional operational compliance, focusing on passenger discrimination complaints and safety protocol adherence. I want everything. And I mean everything." She paused, listening. "Yes, the Geneva summit. It's delayed. This is more urgent. Priority Alpha 1. No, I'm not elaborating now. Just move." She ended the call without another word, her eyes still following Chen. Jonathan was her chief legal counsel, a man who understood the unspoken implications of her commands. Access Protocol 7 was an rarely used, aggressive internal mechanism designed to leverage Access Solutions' considerable influence and resources to initiate deep-dive investigations into entities that posed a significant threat to industry standards or ethical conduct. It wasn't merely an audit, it was a forensic examination, a corporate autopsy in the making. Anya then dialed another number. This time, the voice on the other end was more formal, a distinct tone of respect. "Minister," she began. "Anya Sharma. I regret to inform you that I will be unable to deliver my keynote at the Geneva Aviation Safety Summit this afternoon. An incident with Globus Air has necessitated my immediate attention. I believe the situation may expose significant, systemic vulnerabilities within the national aviation framework that require your urgent awareness. My team will forward you a preliminary report within the hour. Consider this a direct request for your office to oversee an independent, high-level review of their operational integrity." Another pause. "No, Minister. This isn't a personal matter. This is about national security and public trust in our skies. The implications are far-reaching. I assure you, you will want to be fully briefed." She hung up, a barely perceptible tremor in her hand the only sign of the immense pressure she was now exerting. The minister she had just spoken to wasn't just a political figure, he was a key patron of her company and a powerful force in the country's regulatory landscape. The word, national security, was a silent detonation. Finally, Anya turned back to the flustered Chloe, who was nervously watching her. Anya's expression softened slightly, a hint of genuine pity replacing the icy resolve. "Chloe," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "I want you to relay a message to Mr. Chen. Tell him that sometimes, the most silent actions speak the loudest. And tell him, his problems are just beginning." With that, Dr. Anya Sharma turned, her stride purposeful, and walked out of the terminal, leaving behind a bewildered agent and the first faint tremors of a gathering storm. The first ripple of chaos barely registered on David Chen's radar. He was in his office, basking in the afterglow of his petty triumph, dictating emails to a cowering assistant and reviewing flight manifests with a critical, self-important eye. A delay for flight GA207 was announced, minor technical issues, extended pre-flight checks. Chen merely grunted, attributing it to the usual inefficiencies of the ground crew. "Typical," he muttered, "always something with those people." He felt a surge of smug satisfaction, believing his actions had sent Dr. Sharma packing, clearing the path for his important delegation. But then, the calls started. Not from his usual sycophantic network, but from department heads, their voices edged with a new, unfamiliar strain of panic. Maria, head of airport operations, called first. "Mr. Chen, we've had an unprecedented number of unscheduled maintenance inspections initiated by the Civil Aviation Authority. They're grounding 3 of our long-haul jets for random safety checks. This is going to cause significant delays and cancellations." Chen scoffed. "Random. They're always doing that. Tell them to hurry up. We have a schedule to maintain." He genuinely believed it was business as usual, a mere inconvenience. Then came the second call, from Finance Director, Robert. "David, what in God's name is going on? The central bank just flagged a dozen of our recent large-scale transactions for unexplained discrepancies. They've frozen several key accounts pending an immediate audit. Our liquidity is taking a hit, a massive hit." This call finally made Chen sit up a little straighter. Frozen accounts. That's impossible. We have an understanding with the central bank. Who authorized this? His voice was now laced with irritation, not panic. He still thought it was a minor misunderstanding, easily smoothed over by his connections. As the afternoon wore on, the minor inconveniences escalated into a cascade of alarming events. Flights were delayed, not just a few, but a significant portion of the Globus Air departures board turning red with delayed or cancelled. Passenger complaints surged, overwhelming the customer service lines. News channels, initially reporting on general airport delays, began to specifically mention unforeseen operational difficulties at Globus Air. Chen's confident bluster slowly began to unravel. He saw his subordinates scurrying, their faces pale, their phones pressed to their ears. The easy answers he usually offered them, the threats and dismissals, now seemed inadequate. He tried calling his friends in various governmental departments and regulatory bodies, the very people who had provided him cover for years. Each call went unanswered, or met with vague, non-committal responses. "Sorry, David, I'm in a meeting. A bit tied up at the moment, old boy. Best of luck with your internal review." The casual camaraderie, the implied protection, had vanished. A wave of cold dread began to seep into Chen's carefully constructed world. He saw a junior intern, usually too terrified to meet his gaze, openly discussing a federal inquiry on his phone, oblivious to Chen's presence. The term, Axis Solutions, kept cropping up in hushed whispers among his staff, a company he knew only as a reputable, but seemingly benign, consulting firm. He finally remembered Dr. Sharma, the woman he had so gleefully humiliated that morning. Axis Solutions. Was there a connection? He dismissed the thought almost immediately. How could one disgruntled passenger, no matter how important, cause such widespread disruption? It was preposterous. He convinced himself it was just a coincidence, a confluence of bad luck. But the seed of doubt, once planted, began to sprout. The chaos was no longer a wave, it was a rapidly building tsunami, and Chen, for the first time, felt a distinct chill, a premonition that something far more sinister than a mere bad day was unfolding. The next morning dawned with a foreboding silence at the Globus Air regional headquarters. The usual cacophony of ringing phones and urgent chatter was replaced by a tense, almost fearful quiet. David Chen arrived, his face haggard from a sleepless night, his earlier swagger replaced by a nervous energy. He'd spent hours trying to reach his high-placed contacts, only to be met with the same stonewalling or outright refusal. The realization that his protectors had evaporated sent a tremor through his carefully constructed ego. Just as he settled into his office, attempting to project an image of calm, a fleet of unmarked black sedans pulled up to the main entrance. From them emerged a group of impeccably dressed, severe-looking individuals. These were not the usual auditors or inspectors. They moved with an almost military precision, their faces devoid of expression. Led by a woman with steely gray eyes and a no-nonsense bob, who identified herself only as Director Thorne, Federal Aviation Oversight Committee, they swept through the lobby, demanding access to every department. "We are here to conduct a comprehensive, independent review of all Globus Air operations, safety protocols, financial records, and personnel practices," Thorne announced in a voice that cut through the silence like a scalpel. Her tone left no room for argument, only compliance. "We have full federal authority. Any obstruction will be met with the severest penalties." Chen watched them from his office window, a cold knot forming in his stomach. Federal Aviation Oversight Committee. This was beyond the usual local squabbles. He tried to brush it off, to cling to the delusion that it was a standard, if aggressive, inspection. Just a routine check, he mumbled to his trembling assistant, more to convince himself than her. But it was far from routine. Director Thorne and her team immediately set up a command center in a previously unoccupied conference room, transforming it into a hub of intense activity. They brought in their own secure servers, their own communication equipment. Legal teams arrived, not to defend Globus Air, but to assist the federal investigators. Every single document, every email, every internal memo was being meticulously scrutinized. Personnel were being pulled aside for interviews, their faces grim as they emerged. Chen attempted to assert his authority. He strode into the makeshift command center, attempting a confident smile. "Director Thorne, welcome. I trust you'll find everything in order. We run a tight ship here at Globus Air." Thorne barely looked up from the stack of documents she was reviewing. Mr. Chen. Your cooperation is not optional. It is mandated. Furthermore, you are hereby temporarily relieved of all operational duties pending the outcome of this investigation. You are to remain available for questioning, but you are not to interact with any staff regarding this matter, nor are you to access any company systems. The words hit Chen like a physical blow. Relieved of duties. This was an unheard of humiliation. Relieved. On what grounds? This is outrageous. I am the regional director, he spluttered, his face flushing crimson. Thorne finally looked at him, her gaze unwavering. On the grounds of an ongoing federal investigation into widespread irregularities and potential malfeasance. The grounds will become abundantly clear, Mr. Chen. Now, I suggest you return to your office and await further instructions. Chen stumbled out, his mind reeling. His calls to his friends intensified, becoming desperate pleas. He dialed his contacts at the Ministry of Transport, the Civil Aviation Authority, even the local mayor's office, anyone who had ever benefited from his arrangements or shared his disdain for rules. Each response was a colder, more definitive wall. David, I'm sorry, but this is a federal matter. It's out of my hands. The minister's office has explicitly stated no interference. This is serious. The very people who had once shielded him, who had tacitly approved of his methods, were now abandoning him, leaving him exposed. He felt the weight of an invisible hand pressing down, squeezing the life out of his carefully constructed empire. He saw his loyal lieutenants, those who had enabled his corruption, now avoiding his gaze, their own fear palpable. He watched as uniformed federal agents began to escort some of his closest associates from their offices, their faces pale and bewildered. The higher power had arrived, swift and merciless, and David Chen, in his arrogance, was only just beginning to grasp the sheer, terrifying scale of the force he had unwittingly provoked. He was no longer the master of his universe, he was a trapped insect, watched by an unblinking, all-seeing eye. The memory of Dr. Anya Sharma, cool and unruffled, handing him that cryptic message, now returned with chilling clarity. The federal investigation, spearheaded by Director Thorne, quickly transformed from a mere review into a full-blown excavation. The sleek, efficient machinery of the higher power began to systematically dismantle Globus Air's carefully cultivated facade. What started as an inquiry into the technical anomaly on Flight GA207 rapidly expanded, revealing a festering network of systemic corruption and abuse that stretched back years. Thorne's team, composed of financial forensics experts, aviation safety specialists, and legal investigators, worked with relentless precision. They weren't just looking at the present, they were digging into the past, unearthing buried reports, encrypted communications, and suspicious financial transactions. The incident with Dr. Sharma, initially perceived by Chen as an isolated act of insolence, became the initial thread that unspooled a much larger, darker tapestry. One of the first significant breakthroughs came from the meticulous examination of flight logs and passenger manifests. Investigators discovered a consistent pattern: first-class seats mysteriously designated unavailable or technically compromised on flights where high-profile, non-Caucasian passengers, particularly women, had booked premium tickets. These seats were then often reallocated, sometimes moments before departure, to other, predominantly Caucasian, passengers without legitimate upgrades or proper documentation. This wasn't just isolated human error, it was a deliberate, discriminatory practice, a gentleman's agreement among certain senior staff, including Chen, to prioritize a specific demographic. Further investigations into safety protocols yielded even more damning evidence. Under Chen's direct supervision, maintenance reports had been consistently downplayed or outright falsified to meet rigid flight schedules and cut costs. Critical inspections were rushed, minor defects were logged as cosmetic rather than operational, and in several instances, vital replacement parts were swapped for cheaper, uncertified alternatives, with the paper trail meticulously laundered through shell companies. The financial forensics team traced these transactions back to a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations, many of which had direct, undisclosed ties to David Chen and a few of his closest lieutenants. The money saved through these shortcuts wasn't reinvested in safety, it was siphoned off, enriching a select few. Witnesses, initially terrified to speak, began to come forward under the protection of federal agents. Junior staff recounted years of racial and gender-based discrimination, instances where they were belittled, passed over for promotions, or even fired for challenging Chen's authority or questioning his unethical directives. They described a pervasive culture of fear and silence, where challenging the system meant career suicide. One former employee, a brilliant young engineer, tearfully confessed how he was forced to sign off on a falsified safety report or face termination. His testimony, corroborated by his own secretly kept copies of original reports, was irrefutable. The higher-ups in Globus Air's corporate structure, initially dismissive, grew increasingly frantic. Their attempts to stonewall the investigation were met with swift, legal counteractions. Subpoenas flew, demanding access to encrypted servers and private communications. The truth began to emerge: David Chen was not an isolated bad apple. He was a key cog in a larger machine, a regional strongman whose corrupt practices had been tolerated, even encouraged, by a network of powerful individuals within the company and beyond. They had turned a blind eye to his behavior, perhaps even benefited from it, as long as the numbers looked good and no one rocked the boat. As the scope of the scandal broadened, Director Thorne found herself scrutinizing not just Chen, but his network of silent enablers. Documents revealed that critical internal audits from previous years, which should have flagged these issues, had been inexplicably cleared, often with signatures from high-ranking executives in the corporate office. Lobbying efforts, funded by Globus Air, had successfully weakened local regulatory oversight, creating loopholes that Chen had expertly exploited. The technical anomaly of a single first-class seat had become a Pandora's box, unleashing a torrent of long-suppressed malfeasance. The undercurrents of the system were being exposed, threatening to capsize not just David Chen's career, but the entire vessel of Globus Air and the reputations of those who had allowed it to drift into such dangerous waters. Anya Sharma, through her unseen influence, was meticulously orchestrating this dismantling from the shadows, ensuring that every hidden transgression saw the light of day. As the investigation intensified, the initial shock waves radiating from the federal inquiry began to hit the more distant, yet equally complicit, corners of the Globus Air hierarchy. David Chen, confined to his office, watching his empire crumble in real time, was no longer the smug orchestrator of petty humiliations, but a frantic, cornered animal. His desperate calls had escalated from pleas to angry demands, then to increasingly pathetic whimpers, but the silence from his former benefactors was deafening. He was on his own. Director Thorne's team, with the precision of a surgical strike, began to expose the intricate web of patronage that had shielded Chen for so long. Financial records, once impenetrable, now yielded the names of senior corporate executives who had received consulting fees from the same shell companies Chen used to funnel illicit profits. Emails, painstakingly recovered from deleted archives, revealed casual acknowledgments of regional operational flexibility that amounted to tacit approval of his discriminatory practices. There were even thinly veiled instructions to handle any complaints that might escalate, ensuring they never reached a level where they could threaten the larger corporate structure. One particularly damning discovery was a series of internal audit reports, consistently signed off by Vice President of Operations, Marcus Thorne, no relation to Director Thorne, despite glaring red flags. These reports, dating back several years, consistently dismissed anomalies in passenger bookings and maintenance logs as isolated incidents or clerical errors. The federal team unearthed a trail of communication where Marcus Thorne had explicitly instructed regional auditors to expedite their reviews of Chen's branch, effectively suppressing any genuine scrutiny. The implications were profound. Chen was not an anomaly, he was a symptom of a deeply entrenched, systemic problem. His abuses were not just tolerated, they were enabled by a culture of corporate indifference and active complicity from the top down. The investigation was no longer just about a single regional director, it was threatening to bring down the very pillars of Globus Air's corporate governance. Panic spread through the executive floors like wildfire. Marcus Thorne, a man who had enjoyed a meteoric rise through the company ranks, suddenly found his lavish office raided by federal agents. His personal and corporate finances were frozen, his assets seized. He tried to claim ignorance, to paint Chen as a rogue operator, but the mountain of evidence linking him to the cover-ups was insurmountable. His frantic attempts to delete digital files only served to further incriminate him, each deleted document a neon sign pointing to his guilt. Other mid-level managers, who had quietly benefited from Chen's reign or simply turned a blind eye out of fear, found themselves caught in the dragnet. Their careers, their reputations, and their comfortable lives evaporated in a single, devastating week. Some attempted to cooperate, offering desperate confessions and providing further details about the pressure they faced to maintain silence. Others, loyal to the bitter end or too deeply embroiled, clung to their denials, only digging themselves deeper. Anya Sharma, miles away, continued to pull the strings from the quiet control center of Axis Solutions. Her team, working tirelessly, analyzed every scrap of information forwarded by Director Thorne's federal investigators. They provided crucial context, identified patterns, and even suggested new lines of inquiry, leveraging their deep understanding of aviation regulations and corporate finance. She had activated her hidden mechanism, and it was operating with ruthless efficiency, a perfectly honed instrument of justice. Through her network, Anya received real-time updates on the unfolding chaos. She read reports of Marcus Thorne's downfall, of the internal purges, and the growing fear among the Globus Air old guard. There was no sense of triumph, only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. This wasn't about personal revenge, it was about dismantling a corrupt structure that had systematically disenfranchised and endangered people for years. The corporate lawyers of Globus Air, initially confident, now found themselves overwhelmed. Their usual tactics of delay and obfuscation were useless against the federal juggernaut. Every attempt to block access to documents or impede interviews was met with immediate, decisive legal action. The company's stock plummeted, its reputation in tatters. Major institutional investors began to pull out, citing unacceptable governance risks and severe ethical breaches. David Chen, watching the news from his rapidly shrinking office, saw his image, his name, plastered across every major news outlet, no longer as a powerful executive, but as the face of corporate malfeasance. He saw Marcus Thorne, his supposed protector, being led away in handcuffs. The walls were not just crumbling, they were collapsing entirely, burying him and everyone associated with his reign beneath an avalanche of truth and accountability. The higher system, activated by the quiet strategist, Anya Sharma, had proven to be unyielding, unforgiving, and utterly impartial. The day of reckoning was approaching with terrifying speed. The fluorescent lights of the conference room, once a symbol of corporate power for David Chen, now seemed to cast a harsh, unforgiving glare on his face. 6 months after his casual act of discrimination, he sat across a long, polished table, flanked by a phalanx of grim-faced lawyers from Globus Air, who now represented the company against him, not for him. Facing them were Director Thorne and her federal team, their expressions unyielding, and in the corner, a single, unassuming figure, Dr. Anya Sharma. She was present not as a complainant seeking personal redress, but as an expert witness, her presence an undeniable, chilling testament to the scale of his miscalculation. The room, packed with media, legal observers, and shareholders, buzzed with an electrifying tension. This was the moment of truth, the public unmasking of the corruption that had festered within Globus Air. David Chen, though outwardly maintaining a facade of indignant defiance, was trembling inside. He glanced at Anya, whose eyes, calm and unwavering, held a depth that unnerved him more than any shouting accusation. Director Thorne began the presentation, methodically laying out a mountain of evidence. On large screens, a meticulously assembled timeline unfolded, detailing years of fraudulent activity. Financial records flashed, highlighting millions siphoned off through shell companies, directly linked to Chen and Marcus Thorne. Audio recordings, discreetly made by whistleblower employees, played in chilling clarity, capturing Chen's dismissive, discriminatory remarks and his instructions to falsify safety reports. One recording, in particular, featured him boasting about handling the uppity types who dared to complain, directly referencing the incident with Dr. Sharma. Then came the visual evidence, side-by-side comparisons of original maintenance reports with their doctored versions, revealing crucial safety omissions. Photos of substandard parts, illegally installed, were displayed. Testimonies from terrified employees, now under federal protection, were read aloud, detailing a culture of fear, intimidation, and systemic racism. The technical anomaly on Flight GA207, the very incident that had sparked this cataclysm, was revealed to be a deliberately fabricated excuse to deny Dr. Sharma her rightful first-class seat, making way for a less qualified, but racially preferred, passenger. Anya Sharma then took the stand. Her testimony was precise, analytical, and utterly devastating. She spoke not of personal offense, but of the systemic vulnerabilities her company, Axis Solutions, had identified in Globus Air's compliance framework. She presented an expert analysis of the ripple effect of such corruption, from endangering passenger lives to undermining national trust in the aviation industry. She showed how her hidden mechanism, the activation of Axis Protocol 7 and the direct appeal to the Minister of Transport, was not a personal vendetta, but a necessary intervention to protect a critical public utility. Her calm, factual delivery, backed by unimpeachable data, dismantled every attempt by Globus Air's lawyers to paint her as a disgruntled customer. The climax arrived with a video clip. It was a security camera recording from the airport terminal, taken on the morning of Anya's flight. It showed David Chen, his face contorted in a sneer, dismissing Anya. It then showed Anya, composed and deliberate, making her first few phone calls, her posture radiating an unseen power. The contrast was stark: Chen, loud and arrogant in his ignorance, and Anya, quiet and strategic, unleashing a force he couldn't comprehend. Back in his office, the scene from the prologue played out in full, the raw agony of David Chen amplified by the context of his profound downfall. He watched the news reports of his colleagues being arrested, the damning evidence against him laid bare for the world to see. The phone calls he frantically made, the unanswered pleas to his now vanished protectors, the shattering realization that his entire world was collapsing, it all coalesced into a single, agonizing moment of terror and despair. The casual cruelty of 6 months prior had ignited a firestorm, and now, consumed by the flames, David Chen was left with nothing but the chilling echoes of his own hubris. His empire, built on prejudice and deceit, had not just crumbled, it had been systematically, methodically, and brilliantly dismantled. The hammer of justice fell swiftly and decisively. In the aftermath of Director Thorne's damning presentation and Dr. Anya Sharma's unimpeachable testimony, the verdict was not merely a foregone conclusion, but a public mandate. David Chen, stripped of his authority and his dignity, faced a barrage of charges: fraud, endangerment of public safety, and systemic discrimination. His initial attempts at denial, fueled by a lifetime of impunity, quickly crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. He was arrested, not by a single, deferential officer, but by a phalanx of federal agents, a stark, public spectacle that marked the definitive end of his reign. His subsequent trial was a swift, brutal affair, ending in a severe prison sentence and the complete forfeiture of his ill-gotten gains. His powerful benefactors also faced their reckoning. Marcus Thorne, the vice president of operations, was likewise indicted and convicted for his complicity in falsifying reports and enabling corruption. Other senior executives within Globus Air, who had turned a blind eye or actively participated in the illicit schemes, were summarily dismissed, their careers ruined, their reputations irrevocably tarnished. Many faced civil lawsuits from former employees and passengers, demanding restitution for years of abuse and discrimination. The rot, once hidden deep within the system, had been excised with surgical precision. Globus Air, reeling from the scandal, underwent a profound and painful restructuring. The federal government, along with key institutional investors, intervened to salvage the once proud airline. A new, transparent leadership was appointed, committed to sweeping reforms. Comprehensive audits became the norm, safety protocols were rigorously re-evaluated and reinforced, and a robust, independent reporting mechanism for employee and passenger grievances was established, with severe penalties for any form of discrimination or cover-up. The company, once a symbol of unchecked corporate power, was forced to rebuild itself on foundations of accountability and ethical conduct. Dr. Anya Sharma observed the fallout not with gloating but with a quiet, reflective satisfaction. Her involvement in the investigation, meticulously orchestrated through Axis Solutions, had been pivotal. She hadn't sought personal recognition or revenge, her objective had been systemic change. In the weeks following the verdict, she became a leading voice in a national forum on aviation reform, working closely with government regulators and industry leaders. She championed new legislation aimed at strengthening oversight, promoting diversity and inclusion within the aviation sector, and establishing harsher penalties for corporate malfeasance. Her keynote at the rescheduled Geneva Aviation Safety Summit, initially delayed by Chen's arrogance, became a powerful call to action, outlining a vision for a more equitable and safer global air travel industry. The final scene finds Anya a few months later, on another flight, this time in first class, undeniably and unequivocally in her rightful seat. The flight attendant, respectful and attentive, offers her a glass of champagne. Anya politely declines, opting for a sparkling water, and looks out of the window at the endless blue sky. There is a sense of peace about her, a quiet strength. Her actions had not only brought down a corrupt individual and his enablers but had also sparked a genuine transformation, creating a ripple effect of positive change throughout an entire industry. She opens her laptop, not to work, but to read a news report detailing the first quarterly earnings of the new Globus Air, showing a cautious but steady recovery, built on restored public trust. The article mentioned the strict new anti-discrimination policies and the company's commitment to employee welfare. Anya allows herself a small, knowing smile. The journey had been arduous, the battle against entrenched power fierce, but she had played her part with cold, strategic brilliance. The chaos David Chen had unwittingly unleashed had cleared the way for a dawn of a new era, a testament to the fact that even against seemingly insurmountable odds, true justice, meticulously pursued, can ultimately prevail. The sky, once a place of casual prejudice, was now a little more open, a little more just, and a little safer, thanks to the silent shot fired by a woman who refused to be denied.